the trust fund isn't for working, it's for living. Why would I get a job when Dad built an empire for me?" she said, laughing as she tossed her hair and scrolled through photos of her new Armani suit. I remember the laugh more than anything. It was light, careless, the kind of laugh that assumes the world is an ATM with no limit. But 3 weeks after that, when the lawyer cleared his throat in a room smelling like old leather and coffee and slid an envelope across the table, her laugh died on the spot. "To whom do we owe our deepest thanks?" the lawyer asked, ceremonious and bored. She smiled as if the answer was automatic. "To our father," she replied, expecting applause. The envelope was small. It had the firm's embossed logo and a thick stack of pages that would change the next 12 months of my life. The executor, me, read the first line aloud because that's how wills work in Seattle probate. You read the words on paper and the world rearranges itself around them. Whereas I, Edmund Clark, being of sound mind, her face, which until then had been a practiced catwalk of entitlement, went slack. Her fingers, manicured and precise, started tapping her phone without looking. "And whereas," I continued, because I had to hear every humiliating clause, "I hold my children to the same standards I held myself to. For any beneficiary who refuses reasonable employment or willful self-support for a period exceeding 24 consecutive months prior to my death, distributions shall be withheld, and a pro rata debt interest equal to advances, loans, and liabilities incurred by said beneficiary shall be noticed upon the estate." She scoffed. "What? A work clause? That's absurd." I shouldn't have been gloating. My hands were shaking, but not for the reason you think. "She signed a prenup with Dad, remember?" I said. "What prenup?" she shot back. "With my own father? Please." That was the last time she used the word please. But I had no idea what I was about to discover. I said out loud, part confession, part warning to myself. Because that envelope was the beginning, not the end. And what came after would make even sensible people question how well they really knew the people who raised them. Have you ever watched someone assume they were guaranteed everything, only to have a legal sentence turn into a life sentence? Tell me, what would you do if the person you loved decided your poverty was entertainment? We'd all seen the red flags. Anyone who's lived through family wealth knows the warning signs: entitlement, late-night charges with no receipts. The house full of couriers, the way she ghosted conversations about responsibility. But there's a difference between a spoiled kid and someone actively arranging her future on someone else's balance sheet. I should have noticed she'd been relying on my dad's goodwill as if it were a bank account with unlimited overdraft. "You're being melodramatic, Jonas," she told me the night before the reading. "Dad promised me I'd never have to work. He made me. He said you were made for better things than a 9 to 5. I remember him saying, 'Work teaches pride,'" I said. "Apparently, someone left that part out when they taught you the speech." She rolled her eyes and then said something I couldn't unhear. "Why would I want to sacrifice my style for spreadsheets? Let Harold do that." Harold was our family CFO, 30 years older and terrified of confrontation. But I had no idea what I was about to discover. And you won't believe what I found next. 2 weeks later, I was in a small forensic lab on the 4th floor of a downtown building that smelled faintly of pizza and printer toner. Margaret Chen, the probate lawyer I hired because I needed someone who practiced in shark-infested waters, was already there with a stack of subpoenas and the kind of smile that meant she'd already smelled blood. "Show me everything," Margaret said, blunt, efficient. "Phones, iCloud backups, bank statements, Tesla logs, whatever you can get." She refused to work, I reminded her. She bragged about it. Margaret thumbed a file. "People who brag about not working usually have ghosts working for them," she said. "Or they have the signatures of people who think they're clever." We started small. Bank statements from the family holding company, credit cards, our father's corporate emails. And we sent a preservation order to Apple for her iPhone and initiated forensic recovery. You'd be surprised how many people think deleting a message makes it vanish from the universe. Not when you're dealing with cloud backups tied to a family account. I pulled 47 deleted messages, the text said 3 days later, and the number landed in the room like a fist. 47 deleted messages between her and Harold, discussing reallocations and advances, and, more damning, just keep it under the Foundation's radar. 47 deleted messages? She barked with disbelief. Who keeps that many? Somebody who thinks backup equals privacy, I said. We have timestamps, IP addresses, and later, a video. We had GPS ping logs from the Tesla. Remember that line in every tech morality horror story? Showing she'd driven to the family office at 2:13 a.m. twice in the month before Dad's heart attack. We had Ring doorbell footage from the back gate of the Bellevue estate, showing a delivery truck unloading boxes labeled with designer boutiques at 3 a.m. the week before, while our dad was on oxygen. "Why are you showing me this?" she demanded when confronted at the house. "It's just stuff. Men have lives, Jonas." "It's not just stuff," I said. "It's debt. $1.2 million of credit advances you took out in Dad's name via a corporate card. Unofficial loans you signed as guarantee for your lifestyle line with a boutique in Aspen. The family books show liabilities, and Dad knew." "You can't prove Dad knew," she shouted. "He's dead. He can't contradict the record." "We could. We had an email thread. Dad had written, 'If she continues this path, we will enforce the work clause, Ed.' That was the first micro cliffhanger Margaret made sure the probate file carried. But that was just the beginning. Would you believe he left one more trick up his sleeve? He was a man who believed in practical jokes. For him, the estate planning had become his final prank. $847 million. That was his net worth on paper 5 years ago, when he sold the final tranche of Clark Systems. The headlines in 2021 had called him a local legend. But money on paper is different from money under your control. When the last will was published, Dad had transferred the majority of liquid assets into irrevocable trusts for charitable work, climate research, education, the Edmund Clark Foundation, with me named as trustee. The balance of the estate, the actual portfolio of companies, was placed under corporate governance, with shareholder rights going to the company and non-liquid legacy assets to me and to 2 trusts. The spin? He made sure our sister could not reach for a withdrawal without meeting the work clause. "That's impossible," she said. "He would never." "He did," I said, and he left another line. I watched her mouth tighten as I read the clause he'd added like a final jab. "Any beneficiary who shall have incurred advances, loans, or obligations charged to my accounts or the company accounts without prior written consent shall be deemed a debtor to my estate to the extent of such obligations." She seemed almost to throttle on her breath. "How can a will make me into a debtor?" "Because it's not just a will," Margaret said. "It's a mechanism. The estate can seek repayment, and the court can enforce it. You signed promissory notes." "Promissory notes? I never." "But you did," Harold, the CFO, said quietly over Zoom, with the kind of voice that only papers can produce. "You signed them at the boutique in Aspen. I saw you do it, on a tablet. You told me you needed padding while you got your head together." "That's not true," she said. "Then why does your handwriting match the signature on 3 notes totaling $1.9 million? Margaret asked. That's when she threw the first real brick. She filed an emergency motion to have the will set aside on grounds of undue influence. Suddenly, our slow, methodical plan collided with a wall of legal theatrics. She hired a big-name lawyer in Seattle, Armand Roth, the kind of man whose suits cost more than my college fund, and he moved fast. "You're going to need concrete evidence," he said at our first hearing, oily and confident. "If any of you have been pressing a narrative without proof, the court will not allow it." 3 times over the next month, our strategy looked like it would fail. First setback: the bank where the boutique transactions were routed was hit with a cyber attack and temporarily locked down. Subpoenas went into a black hole for nearly a week. For a heartbeat, Everything we wanted to show the judge looked like it had vaporized. Second setback, Harold texted me one morning. "I can't find the tablet image. It's gone." He blamed an intern, then blamed himself. For 2 days, we assumed the worst, that a crucial piece of evidence had been deleted forever. Third setback, Armand filed for an emergency injunction, claiming the trust instructions were ambiguous and that freezing assets would irreparably harm our sister. The judge agreed to a temporary stay, which felt like a knockout punch. "Why do you look like you're 10 shades paler?" Margaret asked, but she wasn't panicking. She thrives on chaos. "Because the judge just hit pause," I said. "If he keeps this freeze, we can't collect, we can't enforce. It's just words." "Then we find a way to unfreeze," she said. "We make this a fight worth the judge's time. We get more evidence." We doubled down. We hired a forensic accountant named Priya Patel, a woman who once traced a $14 million fraud ring across 3 countries and considered it a warm-up. She found something on the boutique's merchant account, a series of refunds disguised as returns that matched charges paid to shell vendors registered to a trust our sister controlled in Panama. Those refunds went to a wire service that routed through an account under her name at a small credit union in Bellevue. "She laundered money," Priya said, "not in the mafia sense, but in the sense of hiding personal expenses as business credits." "Can we trace it?" Margaret asked. Priya smiled. "We can trace everything." Another dramatic pause. Then, what happened next was the game changer. We retrieved the 47 deleted messages from an iCloud backup stored under our father's Apple ID. They were in a folder labeled Holiday and were dated like confessions. In one, she wrote, "Dad will never know if Harold keeps the receipt straight. We just need 6 months." In another, "If Jonas suspects, deny, deny, deny." 2 years of lies had been stripped to threads inside those messages. 2 years of lies. That's a phrase I wrote down in capital letters in the memo to the court. We had a chain: texts, bank wires, the Aspen promissory notes, the ring footage, and the Tesla GPS logs. "You're gonna love this," Priya said. "Harold's bulletproof alibi? Fabricated. He was in the office at 2 a.m., but not on the security logs. Because the security log was edited. We have the original server timestamps and the backup tape from the vendor. Look at this." The room went quiet, as if someone had muted the world. We printed pages and pages. The courtroom would want printed exhibits. The judge would want to see the chain of custody. Margaret arranged every detail like a chess player. She filed emergency motions to lift the stay and to impose a lien on the Bellevue house and the Aspen condo. We asked the court to order an accounting and to allow the estate to offset the debts. Would you have believed 3 months before that a life of Gucci, a string of late-night drives, and a social media feed could be translated into cold, enforceable liability? I didn't, either, until it was all paper and math. The confrontation day felt like a movie. People dressed in navy and gray filled the courtroom. She arrived in an Armani suit, hair perfect, expression less sure. Armand Roth smiled as if the script had been written for him. "This is a family matter," he said at the start. "We came to mourn. We shouldn't litigate immortality." "Immortality isn't what this is about," Margaret said. "This is about enforceable obligations." "Your Honor," Armand said, voice sweet and dangerous, "my client has been the target of a vindictive family campaign. She has every right to challenge the will." "Miss Clark," the judge said, looking over bifocals with the kind of patience reserved for people who've seen thousands of wills and not been surprised by a single human folly. "Do you understand the allegations against you?" "I do," she said. "They're false." "Then tell me why your own text messages say otherwise." Margaret pushed a printed screenshot across the table. The courtroom monitor flicked to life, and the 47 messages scrolled, one by one, like a confession. She leaned forward. "Those are out of context," she said. "Out of context that says, just keep Dad distracted. He thinks I'm on a detox, he won't look," Margaret read aloud. "Out of context that says, Harold will move the charges to company accounts. We can keep this under the Foundation's radar." "Those messages were jokes," she blurted. "We were kids." "You were 29, I said, and for once my voice did not tremble. "Mr. Clark," the judge said. "Your Honor," Margaret said calmly, "we also have promissory notes signed by Ms. Clark, 3 notes totaling $1.9 million. We have merchant refunds that match personal purchases. We have GPS logs. We have ring footage of boxes leaving the family property with boutique labels. We ask the court to adjudicate these as obligations of the estate to be repaid by the beneficiary who incurred them." Armand sprung up. "Judge, you cannot allow an estate to be used as a collections agency for alleged personal grievances. The trust language is ambiguous and unenforceable." Margaret smiled that small, grateful smile she gets when court is finally the battlefield she loves. "Your Honor, ambiguity is for poems, not probate. The will's language is plain. The deceased was explicit." There was a moment, one of those dramatic pauses where the air seems to hold its breath, before the judge took a binder and read a clause out loud. "Any beneficiary failing to meet the work requirement will be subject to a withholding of distributions and shall be liable for advances and unauthorized obligations." The judge looked up. "Miss Clark," he said slowly, "do you deny that you signed these promissory notes?" No answer. Her eyes were wide. "This cannot be happening," she said to her lawyer. "They fabricated this." "Either way," I said softly, "Dad made his intentions clear." "But then," she began, voice breaking, "Dad loved me." "Love and legal documentation are not mutually exclusive," Margaret said, "and the decedent also left a recorded memo that I've been instructed to play." A hush. I hadn't wanted to press the play button because doing so would be like opening a rotisserie of memory, heat, and blunt force. The audio was short. Edmund's voice, gravel and soften with coughs. "If she refuses to work, she refuses to be my beneficiary. She must learn to stand. I put this clause in because I love her toughly." The room was silent. Even Armand looked slightly nauseous. "Mr. Clark," the judge said, "given the evidence, texts, financial records, promissory notes, and the decedent's explicit clause, this court finds that the provisions are legally enforceable. Miss Clark is found liable for the advances and unauthorized obligations, totaling $1.9 million, plus interest. Furthermore, distributions are withheld." She made a sound like a small animal being kicked. "But that's not the end," Margaret said quietly. "We petition the court to allow offset to the estate's creditors and to impose liens." "Granted," the judge said. "The court will authorize offset and declare these instruments enforceable." The blow landed. She stared at the table as if she could not process the weight. "You're going to take everything," she whispered. "We're not taking anything that he didn't authorize to be taken," I answered. But the truth is that victory felt complicated. It wasn't cheering. It was paper and consequences and the cold knowledge that my sister was now legally responsible for money she had assumed would never be asked for. What happened next was the final, savage twist. During cross-examination, Margaret revealed a recording of a voicemail our sister left for a friend 2 days before the will reading. In it, she said plainly, "Why would I work? The will's mine. I told Dad I wouldn't. It's funny. He thinks I should learn, but he probably won't change it." "That's admission of intent," Margaret said. "It proves she anticipated the clause, knew of it, and nevertheless continued to incur liabilities thinking she'd never be held to account." She cried. Then she shouted. Then, in the way people do when they are unmoored, she tried to make a bargain. "I'll work. I'll sell things. Please. Jonas, I can't." "What would you do if someone you loved gambled with your stability?" I asked the courtroom later. "Would you legislate their mistakes into your life?" It was rhetorical, but I asked it because I needed to hear how ordinary people might respond. The aftermath wasn't cinematic in the way a TV show would make it. There were no dramatic arrests, no public shaming hashtags, although Reddit did catch wind. Classic. There were legal bills and collection notices and letters from boutique owners. She had to liquidate handbags and jewelry. The Aspen condo went on the market. The $12 million house in Bellevue stayed under a lien until the promissory notes were satisfied. 6. Months later, I saw her through the window of a small boutique in downtown Bellevue where she now worked part-time folding scarves. She wore a simple blouse, hair pulled back, and she smiled in a way that now looked like practice. A customer asked if she lived in the neighborhood. She said, "No, I moved." She wrapped a scarf and quoted the price without the old sneer. I felt a strange mix of triumph and pity. "Is it satisfying?" my friend Will asked over beers. Will had been the one who texted, "Dude, she's literally counting your money before the funeral." I told him it's complicated. "Justice," I said finally, "isn't about cruelty. It's about accountability." Dad wanted to teach her something. Or he wanted to punish, Will said. Maybe both, I admitted. For me, life tilted back slowly, like the tide returning. I took the trustee role and did my best to run the foundation in a way Dad would have respected. I organized oversight for distributions, implemented a practical work clause with mentoring instead of punishment, and I made sure that no one else in our family would be able to bulldoze their way into the bank vaults again. People asked if I felt guilty. I did, sometimes. You don't get to divide grief easily from duty. But when the judge read his order, I felt a peace that wasn't triumph so much as a sense of order restored. Tell me I'm not crazy for what I did next. I reached out to my sister after the order and offered to help her get job training. I didn't bail her out. I didn't transfer assets back. But I arranged for a counselor, one we could afford through the Foundation's Employee Assistance Program and a career coach through a nonprofit. She refused at first. 2 months later, she accepted. Was I wrong to enforce what our father wrote in his will instead of just giving her the money? Would you have let her slide? What would you have done if you were me? Some people have said I was cruel. Others applauded the court's decision. Here's what matters. We all have to live with the choices we make. For me, the justice wasn't in seeing her humiliated on the witness stand. The justice was in seeing the truth acknowledged and in not letting deception become a family legacy. By the end of that first winter, our family looked different. The company had new governance. The foundation started awarding scholarships and grants. People who had expected a simple inheritance were reminded that wealth carries weight and responsibility. Our sister learned to take a bus once and to ask for change. It wasn't poetic, it was necessary. I still have the screenshots if you don't believe me. I have the court documents, public record. I even saved a clip of the Ring doorbell footage because sometimes proof is comfort. You can look it up in the King County records if you want the receipts. Was I merciless? Maybe. Was I just? That's for you to decide. Would you have pulled the same legal levers if you were standing where I was? Would you have helped her after the decision, or let the chips fall? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Tell me I'm not crazy for sending her to work instead of sending her a check. Was she ever really a victim? And if you want to hear more stories where greed meets accountability, stories of people who thought money could buy them immunity and were proven wrong, subscribe and hit that bell. I've got dozens more like this, and I promise, some of them end with justice. Some of them don't. But all of them reveal how badly we can fool ourselves about the ones we love.